All right. So we are talking today. This is our sixth session. We are halfway through the year. Thank you all so much for being part of this and joining me. And if you're watching this in the recorded version, thank you so much for being with us. We, as I said before, we began today as people were coming into the room. I encourage you to remember the good work that's being done by this region, to support this region financially, and to really communicate with the region about other things that you might like to see the region do. This board is very interested in powerfully supporting you as ministers. So I know that they're always looking for suggestions and support so that they can do more in the region. So please remember them and please reach out to them if you have good ideas for them. I will make sure that in the links to this that you have the link to provide a tithe if you'd like to. Today we're talking about something that everybody has to do. We have to hire, retain, and create a culture in our business, and ours is the business of spirituality. And so I want to start by inviting you into a couple of questions. The first thing I'd like you to do is just think of, sorry about that, I moved the cursor and everything else shifted. I'd like you to think of an employee. It can be anybody in your business, someone you've newly brought in, someone who's been there a long time, but just call to mind someone that is working for your organization. Now that you have that person in mind, I want to invite you to just, especially if you've got a little paper and pen that you can write a note or two on, to take a minute and consider, what do they want from their experience working for you? Just write down 2 or 3 things. And if you don't have a piece of paper, just think of them. Just 2 or 3 things that define what they want from their experience working for you, for your organization. You only need a word or two. So let's move through to the next one. What do you want from them? Again, in a word or two, a couple of words, because you know what you mean. And you don't have to turn your notes in. What do you want from them? The third question is, how do they shape the working culture of your organization? What is it that their work and their presence does that impacts the culture of your organization? And that may be a harder question for some of you because you may not have spent a lot of time thinking about the culture. In a large organization where you have 50 employees or 100 employees, culture becomes a very loud question. What is the culture? How do we work together? In a smaller organization where we have usually 5 to 10 employees, we don't think so much about culture, but culture is important in everything that we do. And culture is simply the character and personality of your organization. If you described your organization, I'm not in big favor of the fact that we have laws in our country that give corporations the same rights as they give people. But you can use that to kind of think through your organization. If you were describing your organization as a person, what are the words that you would use to describe the characteristics of your organization? So I want to give you just 6 ideas that you can kind of run through your head. And a lot of these, I think, will be important to you. So is your organization leadership driven? Do you have a strong leader? Is your organization run by that strong leader? Is there a visionary who really holds the big picture of where the boat is going. That very strong leadership has a lot to do with a culture that has the capacity to move in a solid, straightforward line, because someone knows where you're going and has a forward-looking plan. So leadership-driven organizations in their healthy place have a strong forward-looking plan held by a visionary who is moving the organization willfully and effectively in a direction. Leadership-driven organizations can also become domineering and micromanaging if they're not done well. So being leadership-driven is powerful if there is a vision, and if we're allowing people within that vision to bring their talent forward and not micromanaging them. Another cultural consideration is that you might be productivity and task oriented, which means, we're a place where there's a lot to do. One of my clients, in their interviews with people, they tell people the one characteristic that everybody in their company agreed on is there are no slackers here. They are a company that has many, many projects that they're juggling. Multitasking is required. You are going to work hard if you work here. And you can think to yourself, well, people probably don't want to hear that they're going to have to work really hard if they work here. But if you dig under that a little bit, you'll realize that most people want to learn. They want to be doing something that expands them, that makes them better at what they do, that really takes their skill towards its own level of mastery. So when you talk about productivity and task-driven environments, you are going to be multitasking. You are probably going to be working hard. And the benefit of that is you're going to be honing your skill and increasing your level of ability. Some particular jobs and cultures are revenue driven. They're sales increase driven. And in our environment, that could mean that you are in a position where right now your big focus, whether it's through the visionary or it's through the community, is that you have to raise funds. You have to be financially solvent. And so revenue increase, sales increase, involvement from people in a way that gets them to put money into the coffers can be a really important piece of how you would describe the working culture. Now, remember, this is not the community culture. We're talking about your working culture. In our working culture, as leaders in spiritual organizations, there is a need for revenue generation. And it's something that we sometimes have a tendency to kind of pull out because nobody wants to hear about that. But amongst our staff, it's important that they are thinking through a lens of revenue generation as they do their jobs. It's important to all of our success. Customer service focused, usually we would say we are customer service focused. The product that we offer is not something that you're going to buy and take home and put in your refrigerator. It's a customer-oriented, consumer-oriented product. And I say consumer-oriented because if your community is not using what you give in their everyday life, you're missing the boat. It is something that they are going to consume, take into their being, and use in their decision-making and living process. And they're going to consume what you gave them this week and come back next week for a replenishment, aren't they? So this is an important piece to think about. We also are mission-driven. That doesn't make any of the other things untrue. It is possible to have a leadership-driven culture that is mission-oriented. Right now in Unity, we've spent the last decade kind of talking between these two things. We either have to be mission-driven or leadership-driven. But the reality is, and I say this because this is the reality for me in my personal experience, is somebody has to hold the vision of that mission and how we're living into that mission. There still is a need for leadership, even when it's mission-oriented leadership. That development of leadership culture and faith and trust in leadership is important. And these things are in no certain order. They could be switched around. This is not a prioritized list. There are just things for you to consider in the culture that is your organization. Finally, to be innovative and progressive is an interesting, and we could partner that. We could say innovative and progressive while honoring tradition, because we're back to that figure eight, aren't we? The moving between the traditions and the history into areas that are innovative and progressive, because in today's world, our spiritual organizations need to think out of the box. We have to figure out how to work in an entirely different kind of environment. So these are things that you can consider when you ask yourself, what is the culture of your particular organization? And I suspect that every one of you would have a different culture. You would have things in common, but if you described your organization like you would describe a person, this person is leadership driven, they're productivity and task oriented, they see the value of revenue generation, but they do a really good job of focusing on the customer and sticking to the mission and bringing innovative and progressive ideas out. You can write this as though you were describing a person when you look at your staff. And this particular understanding of your culture is incredibly important to your hiring process. Because if you don't know what the characteristics and personality of your organization and specifically your staff looks like, then you will have a difficult time bringing people on board who are the right fit for your culture and who complement the team that you lead. And that creating a team is really important, isn't it? All of these people that you work with are people who have to work with each other, and they have to work closely with each other, and they have to work with volunteer teams, and they have to be reliable, and you can only do so much. A team is more important in a small organization than it is in a large organization, even though we know it's going to be important in both. But creating a team and a sense of team is incredibly important when you have a small staff, because there's a lot of coverage that has to take place. Somebody gets sick, they lose a parent, something happens. We have to be able to create redundancy on our team, meaning we're going to do some cross training so that people can pick up the slack for one another and care about each other. And ours is a caring industry. It's what we do is care for people. Sometimes what happens in that environment is we're so busy caring for the community that the staff can be left on the outside of the sense of caring. They're so busy doing, and we know this is true for us too. We talk, that's why self-care is such an important part of the conversation in how we lead ministries. But our staff needs to be educated in self-care. And it's important when we're looking at the bigger picture of the staff that we're building, that we look at redundancies and cross coverage so that we can, because what happens if we don't train toward redundancies is that we as ministers end up, and board members too, end up picking up slack that then stops us from doing our job, which is incredibly important to the success of the community. So this kind of cross-cultural conversation amongst your team is important. So to bring your team around a table and say, who here could you cover for if you had to? Whose job do you understand? And to bring your team together and ask them to explain their jobs to each other. In a staff environment, really, what does your day-to-day work look like? If you weren't going to be here, what would be the most important things we would need to know to be able to cover you while you're gone? in case of emergency or whatever happens. So this team piece is incredibly important. Now, when we hire, most often we hire to the job rather than the team. And I want to emphasize for you that both of these are equally important, because if you hire someone who's not a fit for your team, it will affect the productivity of every other person who works for you. It will affect the team morale, and that morale that your staff holds will affect the morale of your entire community. It will eventually roll downhill. So the process of hiring in our environments, because we have very small staffs, is very immediate. When someone is gone, we need to get somebody in that position really quickly, most often because we have no redundancy. We have no one who really can step in and do that job. So creating some redundancy takes a little pressure off and makes a little bit more room for you to patiently look for the right fit. The person who is not only skilled in the areas that you need them to be skilled in, but is also going to be a great addition to the team, actually brings something to the team that will make the team stronger. So you want to look through, as you're thinking about an employee and how they fit on the team, you want to understand the current needs of the candidate. Why are you looking for this job? What is your need? You want to understand the current needs of the position, which is your job description. These are the things that have to be filled. You want to also understand the current needs of the team, the whole team. So you may have a really serious, somber, hardworking team that needs to lighten up a little bit. Someone with a sense of humor might be a really good addition, or you might have the opposite. You might have a team that's very playful and fun and creative, but not particularly grounded. What does your staff team need? Just like we think about that on our board, don't we? We think about the different skills that are needed, and we think about the different personalities. We need to do the same with our staff. And then, of course, what are the needs of your community and your community culture with this person? Always think through the lens of long-term. We have a tendency to fill the immediate need and not think about whether this person is a fit for the next 5 years. So always look to the possibility that the person you hire is going to be with you for the next 5 years. That's very different than, I need to fill this administrative position today. I need to get a groundskeeper today. I know what they need to do. I just need them to do their job. True. All of that is true. But creating a team that feels like a team, works well as a team, and brings the energy of team and collaboration into your community will make a powerful change in your entire community culture. So when we start hiring, one of the interesting things is deciding if we're hiring from inside or outside. And there are pros and cons to both, aren't they? We can hire from inside, and the nice thing is, if we can find the right person, they already know other people, they know how to talk about our organization, they know what we're up to. The downside of hiring from inside is that you take someone who is a community member, who is coming to the community for inspiration and spiritual growth, who has their friends and oftentimes an agenda for participating, not a bad agenda, but an agenda. They're there because their best friends are there. They're there because I have one lady who was in my last community who literally totally came because she knew what kind of man she wanted to meet, and she knew she would meet that man in our community, that kind of man. So whatever their personal agenda is, all of that, if you're hiring from the inside, comes into play. And the high point is they can jump in the job and serve the community with familiarity. The low point is they can end up feeling on the outside of a community that they were on the inside of to begin with. The flip side is hiring from the outside. You have more education to do. And it's harder to identify if that person is a good fit for the community and the teachings. There is more risk involved there in making sure. You have to do a better interview job, better job of interviewing them. And so where we start with this is we start by writing an interesting ad. And most of the time what you see in an ad for a job is you see what these last two areas, what it is. We are seeking an administrator with 5 years of professional background, good communication skills, and someone who is looking for a part-time job, whatever that is. We tend to make our job descriptions point to those things. In a lot of states now, you have to put the pay range in. In Colorado, I know that it's a law. You have to say the position pays from here to here. You want to check that. You want to check, because that is starting to happen in a lot of states, that the labor laws are requiring you to put a pay range in your job description. So usually those last two are what you see in a job description. I want to encourage you to make the job sound like it's something interesting and fun to do, which means to start with something like, do you want to learn how to inspire a community? Do you want to learn whatever it is? What is the fun part of the job? Would you like to interact with people every day? Are you a community builder? We have a great job that will allow you to interact with up to 150 people in an environment that is open-hearted and fun. Different kind of thing. Who will they meet? Who will they work with? What will they experience? What will they learn? Hone your skills in whatever it is. It depends on how you think about the jobs. So if we hire for a janitorial job and we say, we're looking for a janitor who can clean the building twice a week, pay range is from here to here, this is a long-term position. Great. Somebody will respond to that job. If you describe that job as, the words that I use are temple keeper. This is a temple keeper position. This is a position for someone who understands the importance of sacred space and that sacred space should be held in a certain way. You will learn how to care in a sacred way for buildings and community space and for the people who use them. You will experience interaction with a team that is oriented towards creating a sacred and holy experience for everyone who participates. That kind of language is going to change who responds to your ad, right? That kind of language will invite someone who cares about what is sacred and holy. And then you have the opportunity to teach them why it matters that when people walk in the front door, your building is pristine, it's clean, it's organized, it's neat. The trash has been taken out, the counters are clean, the chairs are in order, the floors are clean, there's beauty for people to see. All of that is very different than a traditional janitorial position of, mopping the floors and making sure things are disinfected. The mopping and the disinfecting is important, but it's an entirely different experience for the person doing the job to know that they're creating sacred space where people will pray, where people will grieve, where people will celebrate, where people will come together and grow their soul. It's an entirely different thing to have someone work for you who has that consciousness. They will care for the building in a very, very different way. And we want a staff that understands that's what we're doing. So what you write largely directs the kind of people who will come to you. And yes, I can hear you thinking, but if I write that, I'm going to have 2 candidates instead of 20. But you might have 2 really good ones, or you might have to let your ad run for a few weeks before you find the right one. the person who really can do the job in a way that serves the community different from the person who is taking care of the corporate building down the street, because what we're doing is very different. Most people would agree that interviews are pretty boring. They're nerve-wracking and they're boring. They're the same questions. Tell me about the last job you did. Tell me why you want this job. Tell me why did you leave your old job? Tell me what your strength is. Tell me what your weakness is. It's a different thing to observe someone than to just listen to them talk. So one of the things that you can do while you're interviewing is take people on a tour and introduce them to other people in the company. See how they respond. Do they just shake hands and not say anything? Or do they say, oh, nice to meet you? You can feel that, right? Like you can feel the energy between people. Notice that. How do these two people interact? How do these give time for those people to interact with your space and with your staff? You're going to ask them all the questions that you need to ask, but taking them through to see who you are and what you do, and to give them some more information is an important piece. Now, this is not going to be your first interview. Your first interview is going to be 15 minutes on the phone. Do I even want to talk to this person? Does this person sound like they might have what I want? When you get them in the building, really take them in the building. They have come all the way in. Take the time to introduce them and coach your staff to talk to them, to engage them in conversation so that you can stand back objectively and notice are they conversational? Are they interested? Do they seem like what's the energy like between those two people? All of that. On your third interview, and I do recommend 3 interviews, take them out of the office, take them out for coffee, take them out for lunch, take them somewhere where you have to see them interact in a public environment. Are they friendly? Do they look in the eyes of the person who's serving them, which is, respectful and interactive? What happens when they're with people? Because in our business, what they do with people really matters. So as a minister, I look at this list and I think, I have 1,000 things to do. This is really complicated. It is. And this is the front end of releasing pressure on you, because it means you're hiring people who are effective, who you will retain, who will be part of a good team, and who will make your job easier. On the front end, you have to do the work to make that happen. Involve other people in the question asking. Encourage your staff to ask questions as they interact. With an administrator especially, I will usually bring the current administrator into the office and invite them to ask questions, because they think of things, because it's their day-to-day work. They think of things to ask that I might not think of. And it's, again, your job so often as a supervisor is to observe someone. And when you're engaged in the conversation with no observation time, it changes what your impression is. So take that step back, sit and observe while someone else has conversation with a candidate. Invite these people to attend a service, to attend a staff meeting, to attend an event. Invite them to come into something to see if they'll do it before they get hired. Why? Because you're looking for a person who's going to go the extra mile. You are not looking for the person who's only going to do exactly what's on the job description and is going to be watching the clock for what time they get to clock out. You're looking for someone who is willing to do the extra thing. It's an invitation. It's not a requirement. Hey, I want to invite you. We're going to make this decision next week or 2 weeks from now. Between now and then, here's a calendar of events. We have obviously our Sunday service. And if you'd like to just sit in on a staff meeting, just let me know you're coming and I'll give you the time. We'd be happy to have you sit in and observe our staff and get to see how our team works together. These things tell you a lot about the person that you're going to hire. They tell you, whether they show up or not, tells you whether or not they're really interested in becoming part of the bigger thing you're doing, or whether they're just looking at the fact that their job skills match your job description. And you want somebody who brings more to the table. When you do ask questions, ask meaningful questions. What is your natural talent? That's different than tell me about the skills you'll bring to this job. What is your natural talent? Like if you look at your whole life and you ask yourself in your whole life, what is the thing you do naturally really well? They might say, I'm a natural guitar player. I never took a music lesson in my life, but I can play guitar without even thinking about it. Or they might say, when I'm not doing this, I drive NASCAR. Who knows? But it's a different question. And their ability to think into that question tells you something different about them. Do they automatically go to their job skills, or do they have enough emotional intelligence to think about what you mean by natural talent, and either ask you what you mean, tell me more, explain to me more what you're asking for, or are they really willing to kind of go to their own soul and ask, what am I just naturally good at? Tells you again what kind of presence they'll bring into the place. Tell me about the best, this is one of my favorite questions. Tell me about the best supervisor you've ever had. I want to know, because I'm going to be the supervisor. What is it that really makes a good supervisor in your mind? It could be someone who says, I had a great boss who communicated really effectively and then left me alone to do my job. It could be somebody who says, I had a great boss who checked in on me every single day and asked me if there was anything I needed. Those are two really different personalities. Who is the best supervisor you ever had, and what made them the best? Do they fit with your management style? It's a good question for you to check into. In a perfect world, what would you gain from working here? If this job worked out to be a great job and you're the perfect fit, what would you gain? I'd gain a community I can be in service to. I'd gain better telephone skills. I don't know what I'd gain. Cool. Even I don't know what I'd gain is a good question. It's a good response, because it invites you to tell them, this is what you're going to gain. These are what the challenges are, and this is what you're going to gain. Do you know what someone gains from working with you beyond money and beyond the ability to care for their family? Most of our jobs don't have a lot of upward mobility. And it's important to recognize that, because people often leave because they've just gotten bored with the job. They've learned everything they can do, and they like the people and it's been a fun job, but it's really kind of gotten boring. It's boring. We're taking care of the same building. We're answering the same phones. We're answering the same questions. After about 2 or 3 years, these jobs can become less than exciting. So if you can't create upward mobility, what kind of soul expansion, people expansion, personal expansion are you offering your staff that makes it worthwhile for them to have this job? And are you in the narrative around that? Maybe they get to take free classes. Maybe they get to, maybe you take them on a really cool retreat every year. What is it that they gain for them while they're busy taking care of you and everyone else? Something to think about in not only in your interviewing process, but in your retention process. How do you keep this job feeling like it's different and new, and also consistent and solid? I always like to ask, have you looked at our website? I'm sure that many of you asked that question. Yes, I've looked at it. Great. Tell me the thing on our website that surprised you. Tell me the thing that surprised you. Don't just tell me about, what can you tell me about my board, or what can you tell me about my staff? Tell me the thing that surprised you. Tell me the thing that was most interesting to you. Tell me the thing that caused you discomfort. Was there anything? You're going to now find out whether they really looked at the website or not, whether they actually took time to read it and find out who you are as an organization, or whether they're just saying, oh yeah, I glanced through it. That's a very different thing. People who really took the time to look at the website have something in common with you. They're looking for a good fit. They're not just looking for a place where they can do a job, but they're looking to find out if this place, if there's a marriage here, if they're going to be a good fit, or you are going to be a good fit in their life and their career. So we talked about accountability before, and we talked about the fact that accountability is based on information, expectations, and building of trust. So that starts with your onboarding. When you're onboarding, you want to make sure that you give them the information. If they are contractors, that they have a contract that fully outlines exactly what it is that's their job is, that it is entailed in their job. You want to give them their staff handbook, which if you don't have a staff handbook, you want to create, because legally there are some things that you need to define for them. What days do they have off? How do you handle sick leave? What happens? How do they file a grievance if they're unhappy about something? There's a reason for a staff handbook. That information begins to set expectations, as does their job description. These are the things that if it's an employee, the contract and the job description serve the same purpose. They set the informational parameters for what will become the expectations. So those are paper that you give them that they can read and review. Usually with a staff handbook, I include in the back a page for them to sign and return to me when they have finished reading it. And if they haven't brought that back in a week, I'm going to ask for it and say, I need it in 2 days. I really need the signed form that says you read the handbook. Because then if somebody has a grievance or something comes up and they say, well, I had no idea that's how I did that. Hello, here's the paper. It's in the handbook. You said you read the handbook. Really important to accountability. Our handbook says these are the days off. Our handbook says here's how we handle sick leave or maternity leave or whatever it is. So having a signature page is really important. When it comes to expectations, you really define expectations in the process of onboarding. In your onboarding process, you're going to review things that are in the handbook and make sure they really have them. And you're going to put together a training schedule. And whether you are training that person or you have a staff member who's training, yeah, that's my dog in the background drinking water. Sorry about that sound. No matter who's training, you're going to use that word, expectations. Our expectation is that you'll arrive on time each day. And if you can't arrive on time, that we'll get a call in advance so that we can plan coverage. Our expectation is that you'll schedule your vacations, with 30 days notice or 2 weeks notice or whatever is true for you. Our expectation is that you will answer the phone in a light and happy voice and that you will make people feel welcome. That's our expectation. Our expectation is that if you're having a bad day and you are unable to answer the phone in that way, that you will come and talk to the minister or someone to either kind of process through a little bit whatever is going on for you so you can do your job, or to ask for a little time away to get your head in the right place, because we want and expect that every person who calls here will be met with a smile in your voice and at least a sense that their call is welcome. So this onboarding process is when you set your expectations, and speaking in that language is really important. This 90-day review, after 3 months, you will have taken them through enough training that they're going to know what questions they have and you're going to know where they're falling short. This is a really much more important review than the review you're going to do at 1 year. Because at 90 days, legally, they're used to 90-day review is you're either working or you're not working. If you're not working, we may cut you loose at 90 days. If you are working, but there's some problems, we're going to say, so far, there are some things you're doing really well and some things you're not doing really well. I'd like to give you some coaching in these areas, and then I'd like to review again in 90 more days. So now you're making sure that training has become action, that the things that you've trained them in, they're actually doing the way you want them done. And if after 120 days it's not working out, then you might be cutting them loose and starting the process over, because you're looking for the person who's going to stay long-term. You're looking for the person that is so worth putting your time and energy into training. And this 90-day review must come with suggestions. This is not the review where you say, oh my gosh, you're the answer to the dream, I'm keeping you forever. Because the honest truth is, that's a boring review. If all you tell me is I'm doing a great job and you don't give me anything to work on, my job just got really boring. This is an opportunity to say, wow, you have a lot of skills I didn't know you have. I'd like to look for ways to expand your responsibilities because you're a much better communicator, or you're a much better writer, or you're really great in your follow through. So I'm going to be taking advantage of those skills and finding ways to have you coach follow through on the team. I do notice that you're weak in this area, and this is the training I'm thinking about getting for you, the training I'm thinking about giving you. I'd like you to work with so-and-so. You're kind of weak in unity understanding. I'm listening to you talk on the phone or talk in the hallway. I'd like to have you spend an hour with our LUT once a month, just not because we need you to believe what we believe, but because we need you to understand what we believe and speak about it in a very clear and accurate way. So this 90-day review is incredibly important to the long-term relationship that you have. Like I said, more important than your annual review, because the annual review assumes that they've worked out pretty well. They've stayed for a whole year. If you have them there for a whole year and they're not working out, you are remiss in having not released them. Because if you've done these steps, you've given them good onboarding, you've given them clear expectations, you've given them a 90-day review and told them to work on things, and 3 months later, they're still not doing those things, that's when you need to cut the cord. Because they're not going to be happy and you're not going to be happy. It's really important that you build trust, and you build trust by doing what you say you're going to do. You make sure the training processes are solid. You make sure that they get the documents and that you follow what is written in the documents. If you make a change and you add something to their job description, then you write it down on their job description and you give them a new one. And you say, we've added this and we've made this adjustment. Agreed? Please sign the bottom. That way we know that we've talked about it and I didn't give you something and not discuss it with you. And that 90-day review, you have to mark your calendar the day you hire them. You don't want it to be 91 days. You want it to be less than 90 days, 90 or less. So mark it on your calendar and tell them, let's get your 90-day review on the calendar. Your 90-day review will be on this day. How about this time? Now they know exactly when it is, and you are reliable and rock solid for them. And that helps them to feel solid in their new job. Employee retention is really important. The first word I have on this list is observe. Employee retention is about observing what someone is doing, documenting, I'm really happy with this, I'm unhappy with this, here's something that I need to talk to them about. Having an employee file and documenting so that you can get clear what you want to communicate, and then coaching. Observe, document so that I've got my head clear, think about how I'm going to coach them, and then coach them toward improvement, or congratulate, observe, document, and congratulate. Listen, I've been watching you in your interactions with the staff. You really seem to care about the people around here. Thank you for that. It makes it a much more pleasant working environment to have that kind of personality interacting. I've been watching you clean around here. I can tell you really get how sacred this is. Thank you for bringing your whole heart to this. I see you. I see you. I see you. So in that first year, observe, document, coach, congratulate, document more. Be sure you document what's right as well as what's wrong. I told them they did a good job at this. I coached them to improve this. Be sure and document those things so that when you do get to your annual review, you have all of those notes. Sometimes when something goes bad, we forget the good. We forget the things that they do really well because we're pissed off, we're irritated. Somebody did something that really makes us angry. And being able to go back to their file and go, yeah, but they did this well, they did this well, they did this well, and they really blew it here. Did they blow it so bad that I have to let them go? Or is there recovery? It helps bring us back to center. We generally only document what is wrong, and we document it so that we have justification if we have to let someone go. So I want to just encourage you to have a file for each of your staff members with a sheet of paper in it and document not only what's wrong, but the things that you like. And over time, to reward them. So when you go back and look at this for your annual review, your annual review is your opportunity to reward that really good work. Are they going to get a raise? Are they going to get an extra week of vacation? What is it that you're going to do? And the next year you start over again. Same thing, fresh piece of paper. If someone isn't working, free up their future. If someone isn't working for you, you are not helping them by keeping them on board, and you are not helping you either. I love this quote by Mark Cuban. Creating a close connection to those you do business with has its many risks, rewards, and consequences. There are few things in business I've encountered that are more difficult than firing someone, particularly if that someone has always been or has become a friend. On the flip side, I've been rewarded with many friends. People who work for us for a long period of time often feel like friends. I had an employee remind me at one point when I said that, you've become a really dear friend for me, and I really appreciate what you do. And she said, I appreciate that you think of me as a friend. You need to remember that this relationship is not an equal relationship. You have the liberty of looking at anybody who works for you as a friend. We all have to make sure that we're doing what you need us to do. And it was a serious wake-up call for me. It was a really important reminder that just like when we talk about not getting in relationship with someone we're counseling because the power thing is different, the power thing is different between us and our staff. And we have to remember that because we are an open-hearted kind of place where we care about people and where people can come to work for us and they can actually share what's going on in their life, and they can look for tools and find ways to grow and become really deeply attached to the community that they're in service to. We have to remember to hold a little bit of separation between us and them. And, we really appreciate these people. When they do a good job, they make our life easier, and ours is complicated work. So we really appreciate and value them. When we have good employees, it's important to reward them as good employees and to remember to maintain some objectivity. And sometimes a really good employee can't always do the job, and it isn't because they're doing a bad job. One of the things that happens a lot of times specifically in the church environment is you have an administrator who's been there 20 years. And what they did 20 years ago and what they can do today in today's technological world is really different. And we have to really look at what the needs of the community are growing into and whether or not this person who's been loyal, whom we love, should stay or go. We might have a music director who 20 years ago had a beautiful voice and has been singing for 20 years and is no longer bringing forth the same quality, or has become uninterested in working with a music team or a choir because it's gotten to be too much work and they're older and they're not interested. A lot of times in church environments, we find people who are not quite able to do the job they could do 20 years ago. That's a tough one because they've been loyal and we care about them. So this piece of maintaining objectivity and remembering what your job is really important, and being able to free up someone's future so that they can go on to the next thing in a caring and clear way means saying it in a caring and clear way. And the quicker you pull off the Band-Aid, the better. Open your heart, strong back, soft front, speak what's true. You can no longer do this job, or you have to change to be able to do this job. I had to do this about 2 months ago with a young lady, 26 years old, who works for a company I consult, and I do a lot of HR work for them. And she got pregnant, got morning sickness, and stopped selling the product. She just wasn't performing. And she was visibly unhappy and telling us on a regular basis how ill she was. And we finally, after a couple months, sat her down and said, look, we understand you're struggling. You have to do this job. If you want to keep this job, you have to achieve this goal in the next 3 weeks. Otherwise, both of us should admit this isn't working. This is really hard to do with a woman who's pregnant. Because for me, as a mother of 4 kids, I want to take care of her. I want everything to be right. But the reality is there is a job that has to be done. And she rose to the occasion and she exceeded the sales expectation. And she's like a different human being now because she got a little kick in the pants and it made her get back to who she is. So we have to have clear and effective communication. It's not easy. Clear and effective communication. We have to clarify our expectation. And if someone isn't meeting our expectation, we have to be able to let them go, because we have to be able to think about the overall good of the team and what we're working towards, where we want to get them. So offboarding, there's obviously you want to get things back. You want to get their keys. You want to get files from them, any equipment. I suggest doing a tour of their office. Please forgive my typo there. I suggest doing a tour of their office with them. Did you get everything that belongs to you? Is there anything in here that might be difficult for me to find? Can you just show me where things are? Oh yeah, I keep these here and I keep these here, and this is where you'll find this. Even if you know, something could have moved. So it saves you time. And if you've done this well, most people are willing to do that. Let's go into your office and make sure that you have all your stuff and that I know where everything is. It's really good, again, to have a signature form that says everything has been returned. So it goes in their file and you're not having to ask yourself 6 months later, did I remember to ask for this? Check off what they returned, then you know you got it back. And if you didn't get something, that's when you can go back to that list and say, did they give that back to me? Oh gosh, it's not even on this list. I should call them and find out if they still have it. One of the labor laws that you want to know about is if you're firing someone, you need to be prepared to pay them immediately. You don't wait till the end of the pay period. You have to get to your bookkeeper, get their check done, and you pay them immediately. That's what's legally required. In some cases, when you're offboarding someone, it's a severanceable opportunity. They're leaving in a good way. You have to let them go because you're reducing staff or changing the formulation of your staff. In those cases, you might want to write them a letter of recommendation. If it's a bad fit, it's a personality fit, but they're really good at their job, give them a letter of recommendation. This person is very effective in these areas. And I always recommend having a board member do an exit interview, because you're going to find out what they're going to say in public. And you want to know that when they're leaving. You want to know what their story is leaving. You want to be prepared to handle that with your community. And you also want to learn from it. You want to learn what they think went wrong and how you can improve yourself as a leader. So, like I said, that's a lot of information all at once and a lot to think about. And there are probably a lot of things on those in this presentation that you're already doing. The thing that I'm the most aware of from a ministry point of view is how limited your time is and how much time HR takes. It's to get the right person, the person who's going to stay with you, the person you're going to train once in 5 years rather than having to train 3 people in 5 years, the person who's going to not get bored with the job and stay with the job and develop relationship with the community. To do that takes a strong start. And it also takes staying in the mindset that you are an employer all the way along.